Ever wonder how mountain men survived winters that would send us scrambling for the thermostat? I'm talking about temperatures that would freeze your eyelashes solid, deep in the wilderness, with nothing but what they could carry. It wasn't just about being tough, it was about being smart. They possessed a kind of cold-weather wisdom that we've largely forgotten in our world of central heating and high-tech gear. And some of their secrets might just surprise you and could even save your life one day. Let's get one thing straight. Mountain men weren't superhuman. They got cold, just like us. The difference was they understood cold on a fundamental level. For them, it wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a relentless predator. Their first and most crucial principle was staying dry. Not just from snow and rain, but from their own sweat. We think of layering up as piling on the thickest, warmest things we have. They thought differently. Their base layer, the one right against their skin, was almost always wool. Not the scratchy stuff you might be thinking of, but fine wool that had an incredible property. It wicks moisture away from the skin. Even when it gets damp, wool retains a significant amount of its insulating ability. Compare that to cotton, which they called the death cloth. Once cotton gets wet with sweat, it sucks the heat right out of your body, a fast track to hypothermia. So, Rule 1. Cotton kills, wool saves. Next, let's talk about their outer layers. You might picture them in huge, bulky buffalo robes, and while those were used, their daily gear was more practical. They favored buckskin, a type of soft, pliable leather. Now, buckskin on its own isn't waterproof and isn't the best insulator. So, what was the secret? Grease. They would liberally coat their buckskin clothes and moccasins with animal fat, like bear grease or tallow. This created a surprisingly effective waterproof barrier, repelling snow and sleet. It also made the leather more durable. Sure, they probably didn't smell like a field of flowers, but they were dry and warm. Another key concept was loose layering. We often buy snug-fitting winter coats, thinking it traps heat better. The mountain men knew that was a mistake. They wore their clothes in loose, adjustable layers. Why? It traps air. The air between the layers is what truly keeps you warm, not just the material itself. It's a personal insulation system. If they started to sweat while chopping wood or tracking an animal, they could easily open a layer or remove it entirely to vent that heat and moisture. They were constantly managing their body temperature, a process modern hikers call thermoregulation. They didn't have a fancy term for it. It was just common sense for survival. Think about their footwear. We have insulated, waterproof boots. They often wore several pairs of thick wool socks inside oversized, grease-coated moccasins. This created a thick, breathable buffer zone. They would even stuff their moccasins with dry grass or fur for extra insulation. This system was breathable, preventing the sweat buildup that leads to frostbite. And it was adaptable. If their socks got damp, they'd swap them for a dry pair they carried with them, and hang the damp ones inside their shirts, using their own body heat to dry them out. Let's move on to shelter. They didn't have high-tech, four-season tents. Often, their best friend was a simple lean-to. They would find a natural windbreak, like a rock outcropping or a thicket of pine trees, and build a simple frame of branches against it. Then, they'd pile evergreen boughs, starting from the bottom and overlapping them like shingles on a roof. This would shed snow and create a surprisingly weather-resistant shelter. But the real magic was on the inside. They would build a long fire, not a bonfire, but a controlled long fire, a few feet in front of the shelter's opening. Then, they would build a reflector wall of stacked logs or rocks on the other side of the fire. This wall would bounce the heat from the fire back into the lean-to, creating a pocket of radiant warmth. They weren't heating the air. They were heating themselves directly with infrared energy. They'd sleep on a thick bed of springy fir boughs, which lifted them off the frozen ground, providing insulation from below. This simple, elegant system allowed them to sleep comfortably in sub-zero temperatures. And what about food? Surviving that kind of cold burns an incredible number of calories. They couldn't just pack a few energy bars. Their diet was almost entirely fat and protein. Meat from elk, deer, and beaver was their staple. But the most prized part was the fat. Fat is the most calorie-dense food source available, and it was their fuel. They would render animal fat into tallow and eat it straight or mix it with dried meat and berries to make pemmican, the original survival superfood. This high-fat diet provided the sustained energy needed to generate body heat all day and all night. Carbohydrates, which we rely on, burn too quickly. For the mountain man, fat was life. Their mindset was also a critical survival tool. They didn't fight the cold. They respected it and worked with it. They moved deliberately, conserving energy. They paid constant attention to the wind, the changing light, and the feel of the air on their skin. Every action, from gathering firewood to setting a trap, was done with an awareness of its energy cost. Panic was a death sentence. A calm, methodical approach was the only way. They understood that the wilderness didn't care if you lived or died, so they had to care every single second. So, what can we learn from all this? First, the principles of staying warm haven't changed. Stay dry, block the wind, and insulate. Second, natural materials like wool and fat are incredibly effective. Third, think in terms of systems, not single items. Your clothing, your shelter, and your fire all work together. A loose, layered clothing system is more effective than one thick, tight coat. A small shelter with a heat reflector is better than an open camp. The next time you're out in the cold, even just for a walk, think like a mountain man. Are you starting to sweat in that big parka? Unzip it. Vent that moisture. Are your feet getting cold? It might be because your boots are too tight and your socks are damp. They knew that being comfortable in the cold wasn't about enduring misery. It was about applying knowledge. It was a science of survival, passed down through experience, and it's a wisdom that's just as valuable today as it was 200 years ago. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, give us a like and subscribe for more dives into the practical wisdom of the past. See you next time.